Hello, it's Chloe Bruce, the journalist, speaking again about her mental health problems. I've mentioned in previous videos how I was diagnosed with schizophrenia in my late 20s, and it's been a long journey. And I've described some of my early symptoms and how troubling they were and how distressing. And I've also discussed how a few years after my diagnosis of schizophrenia, I was diagnosed as having epilepsy after being given a video EEG, and how these two problems interlace and interact also with the environment we're in. But I want to say today, just using bullet point notes, how it's difficult to describe, but it's easy to think a person has just one psychosis, whereas in fact each of my experiences of psychosis has been different. It sort of comes in phases. I have 3 or 4 phases of different types of psychosis, and they were very distressing until about the year, say 2009, when I was readmitted into hospital, Rose Ward, which I'll discuss a bit more in another video. It was, although it was a very difficult time for me, something new started to happen, which was a type of spiritual voice instead of a menacing voice, and I started to have extremely strong, powerful spiritual experiences, and I started to believe very strongly in heaven on earth. But it was not just spiritual experiences. I became aware that I've always been a believer that everything happens at once, which I understand is a kind of block universe in physics. And I had more and more spiritual experiences, and I really felt that all these people who were meant to be long gone are out there somewhere in this world. And I believe also in a multiverse in parallel worlds. And I want to say some of these ideas that I had, is easy to sort of think, how they work. But I want to discuss sort of how elaborate some of these, what people would think were psychotic thinking would be, but for me they're intense spiritual experiences, and that's how I stay happy and content, even though it's a bit distracting. I've learned to live with it. So what happened in this particular episode, I had more and more sense that it was just a wonderful heaven I was in. Even though I'm a mere mortal, I like to think that we're in heaven on earth, and that it's up to us to make it a nice place. But I was also very aware that there's evil out there, and that some people have horrific, we can all have flaws, but some people have horrific intent towards malintent, let's say, towards others. And I became very preoccupied about how the criminal justice system would work, how it was that any judge could make a judgment, and how proof worked in a court of law. I've never been in court, and I was thinking, well, how would it work, this evidence? And anyway, but I've always been very interested in physics. Although I'm a journalist and have nothing to do with science, when I was a child I wanted to be a space physicist, and I just, for one reason or another, this didn't happen. I had science, but not much, and I love science and always have. And I've always been an admirer of Albert Lord Einstein insofar as I can understand his wonderful ideas, and I've also been a fan of Sigmund Freud, the psychoanalyst and neurologist. And I've mentioned these people in earlier videos, and in the context, say, for example, of holography. But in this world I was I think, let's say, yes, it was 2019, I thought I was in touch with all kinds of, in this episode that I'm even still in, I felt I was in touch with all kinds of people in this block universe, if that's how I'm understanding it correctly. I'm sure it's more complicated than I've put it, this theory. But I thought, well, I want to get in touch with Albert Lord Einstein. I had a strong instinct. Some of my voices said, can you just please get in touch with him? So I thought, well, how do I do it if he's over there in, say, the early 20th century and I'm here in the 21st century? And so let me get this right. I'm in the 20. I never get this right. So he's in the early 1900s, and I was at this point in 2019. So I thought, well, I thought he had an ear in the space, a sort of listening post in space, a sort of technology that enabled him to hear other Earths. And so what I did is I deliberately took a pen and I wrote on a piece of paper, "Dear Al," I do speak a little German, but not that well. And I wrote it in German, and I said in the equivalent in English, "Dear Albert Lord Einstein, I just introduced myself. I'm Chloe Bruce. I'm a journalist. I specialise in Russia and natural gas, and I would like to get in touch." And I said the year I was in, and a little bit more about me. And I just said, "I love you, ich liebe dich," and Chloe, because that's how I feel about these people. They're wonderful. Lots of wonderful people out there. And then anyway, I suddenly heard a voice say, oh, hello, it's Albert Lord Einstein. And there was a kind of circle, which is a holographic communication device. And anyway, he discussed some of the situation with me, and I asked for Freud, and they were contemporaries, and they knew one another, and I was in touch with both of these people. Although I wouldn't say that Sigmund Freud's real name is quite that. I would think it's a slightly different name. Well, that's just my understanding of what he was saying. But I know that obviously people say, of course not, that's his name, that's his passport name. But it was just something to me. I felt it was because Freud is just, I think it's coming from the word joy, Freude in German or something. I'm not sure. My German might be faulty at this point. But anyway, anyway, we started to discuss various issues. And my understanding from what they said was that there's a kind of the reason we were talking about criminality and war in particular. I was very concerned that they were in the war still, and I said, by the way, we won World War II. And when he came to me, I said, I understand that your theories have now been confirmed. Most of them have been confirmed, and he was very pleased. I think it was the quantum physics theory. I don't know much about it. I just read a book a while back. And there were some theories that weren't actually confirmed, and he was very pleased. And I said to both of them, Sigmund Freud and Einstein, what they meant to us. I said, you were just, you're the greatest scientist. You're just huge in the future. And they were very pleased. But they started to say that how criminality and war worked is that there's an fMRI scanner which they've devised together, and it's in outer space, but it can actually fixate on someone's mind. And the way they were able to read the future, they couldn't see, they said. They could look into the mind of a person and see what they saw. And it was quite tricky. Obviously since the JWST has come into being, the James Webb Space Telescope, yes. And this was afterwards, but we were discussing telescopes a lot. And they said that this fMRI scanner could not just read mind, it read criminal intent, and it could see people building up to crime, and that it had a ability to look several seconds ahead to what the person would do. So if they were to hit someone, then they could see that actual movement occurring in the future, but just several seconds they could see. And I was thinking, and we all were, I'd be horrified. Say if I had a brain tumour and had lost my faculties enough to become violent, very, seriously violent, I would want this to happen, which is basically, they said that the way they're resolving the issue is to have nanotasers, which you certainly could have a taser drone, which could taser as a drone going overhead, but they've actually developed a nano drone that can electrocute someone. But there's also the issue, it's not just looking in the mind to see ahead, there's also ways of predicting a moved limb. So if I moved this arm, it's getting easier and easier to predict a moved limb. So if I did anything violent with this arm, hopefully it would be picked up and I'd get a shock. And it wouldn't be a lethal shock, but obviously you can grade the shocks as far as I understand, and some of them could be lethal in certain circumstances, for example, in a serious war or something. But they'd have to look at intent and the extent to which actual evil intent was meant to be there. And although I wouldn't have necessarily a fundament to have evil intent, I still want it done, even because that's how I feel. I just wouldn't want to risk brain damaging someone at all by hitting them. I'd rather be zapped, as the case may be. Anyway, so I was just looking at my notes. Yes, so what they also said was that they had this was a bit before the whole issue of tactile holograms came out. I think that they've now got some ability to have tactile on a hologram. But what they said was they'd been booking. They were obviously they're preoccupied by time travel and how that would function, and they said that they were booking space for future time travelers because it's all happening at once. They have booked, say, a seat in a cafe with a hologram, an extremely advanced tactile hologram, which they've got, they said, and it would book a space. So one day that space could be occupied by a genuine time traveller, because although they said they could access time travel, which I cannot do in my awareness very well, I feel sometimes I can, I think we all can have some ability to time travel, but they said that it was just a question of disease. They were extremely concerned about the issue of disease were they to time travel. But they said that they liked this era partly because they predicted that AI would become extremely smart at this point. Anyway, but what the interesting thing is, I've mentioned how I have mental images, which I like to interpret as a hologram, to feel better about it, to put it in some kind of scientific concept for want of better information. No one's really told me what they are. And what I thought was this: if someone can't see them, and I can see them, but no one else can, which is a definition, I think, of a delusion. It's an unshared reality. No one else can see what you see. But imagine there's a visual mask up against a hologram, and it disguises the hologram as an ordinary object. That would be one possibility. And you could also disguise your various weaponries, let's say in space, using visual masks. And there's also the issue of the voices I hear. How am I communicating, let's say, with Einstein back then or Sigmund Freud back then? And supposing there was a radio wave that would go, I know that sound doesn't, strictly speaking, travel in a vacuum, as far as I can understand, but suppose there was a radio wave that they were able to transmit from outer space and transmit it down to me. And then you have the thing of voices you hear, where strictly speaking no one else can hear what you're hearing. And that's quite true for me. I've never really bothered saying, does this person hear this, does this person hear that? I'm sure they don't. But supposing there was a white noise issued by a nanotechnology that could issue just the visual mask also, but also a white noise around the radio waves coming towards you. And I don't really care if people don't like these ideas. I know that I like to think about these concepts anyway, and I have to try and interpret my own body and my own way I function. And I have not got any other explanations. If a doctor wants to come up to me and say, oh no, it's this, that and the other, as far as I understand, there's no scan even to see these phenomena. And so I just have to interpret it my own way, because no one else has bothered interpreting me at all or giving me any explanation as to what schizophrenia is. But anyway, this is the world I live in, and I'm permanently in it. I just think about these ideas all the time, and I like this world. It's where I want to be. And although it's distracting, other people might not care for these ideas, I happen to find extremely giving me a lot of quality of life and joy to think a bit more, not laterally, let's say, nor out of the box, but just to think about things that are truly worthwhile thinking about, because they can change the world. Thank you.